So this is what we used to call an advanced attack. Pretty much everybody in the cyber industry now accepts that it's an average attack these days. All the things that affect you as individuals, that cause your home router to fall over periodically, that may result in your second cousin twice removed getting ransomware infected on their computer. All of these things are utterly and completely automated. I hope you realize this, but all of those attacks, from initial scan through to execution, through to payload delivery, are all completely automated, which means that the criminals are sitting there with a very nice income stream and the time and opportunity to actually sit back and take a more targeted approach against organizations that take their fancy. And that is what the threat analysis is about. It's looking at a particular organization and saying which sort of threat actors, as we call them, may be interested in our business, why, and how may they attack us? What's their typical modus operandi? As you might imagine, a foreign state, a nation state, whether it's in Eastern Europe or Asia or closer to home, will have a particular way of operating that is predictable and based on good intelligence. So if we see, as we have, let's say, the members of the Russian security services sitting on a network in effect in the UK, or we see members of the Chinese government sitting on networks in the UK, we know that that is typical behavior for them. They will do that remotely, typically. They don't come and knock on the front door or try and get a job as a cleaner in that business. It's not their typical modus operandi. On the other hand, if we look at something like activists, people with a political or a passionate agenda of some sort, for example, our clients in the pharmaceutical industries will often be targeted by animal rights people. They'll also be targeted by their competitors for commercial espionage. Those sorts of attacks are quite different and are typically more in person. And there's a whole range of attackers and a whole range of methodologies. Our task before we engage with a red team exercise is to sit down with the client to discuss and inform, to lead a workshop, if you will, on who are the threat actors that are pertinent to that particular business and that business sector, what sort of information or data or money or people or destruction are they after achieving, and what methods are they most likely to use given experience elsewhere in the community where we share that intelligence about how they operate, the techniques they use, and the relative likelihoods. We sit down and we say, on the left here, this is a standard diagram from NIST, the US organization, that on the left describes to you the threat actor analysis. That's what I was just describing. We think about who's likely to do what against this client organization. We also, of course, take into consideration what's the impact. For example, if an attack were very likely, but the only significant impact might be that, let's say, I don't know, the lights in the toilet don't work between 9 and 10 on a Monday, you can probably cope with that. If the impact, on the other hand, is sufficient embarrassment in the public domain that the share value may drop by 20%, then that's probably more significant. So we tie those two things together. We look at the likelihood and the capability and motivation of the attacker. We look at the vulnerability in the business and what the impact would be of a particular sort of data corruption or data theft. And we build scenarios. And this is the fun bit. It's like writing a sort of storyboard for a movie. I don't know whether you've seen any spy movies or TV series in your life. It'd be a rare person that hasn't. And you understand that in the fictionalized world, people will build what they call a jacket, a backstory for themselves. That's precisely what we do here. If we're simulating someone who's working for a competitor, let's say a professional industrial espionage agent, then we know that they will have the skills to build the appropriate websites to support their fake story. They'll build the appropriate LinkedIn profiles. They'll make the connections with the appropriate people. They'll have the phones answered in the right way, that sort of stuff. So that we draw out a storyboard from start to finish where each stage reflects these steps we've got on this slide here. So starting with background research to understand what we need to know as the attacker about the business. Where is it located? What's its internet presence look like? Who works there? Who reports to whom? Who's dissatisfied? Who's hoping to get a rise? Who's been publishing rude things on the internet? Whatever. To profile, as far as we can, a likely attack vectors. Then we conduct the first level attacks, nearly always human, and this is why the human part of the defense is so important. Almost every attack these days has a human component, even if it's just a phishing email with a link in it or an attachment. Sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's an in-person visit, frequently it's all three, but that is the entry point. It's way easier, in fact, 100% successful in our experience, sadly, to get some foothold in a business through being unpleasant and manipulating people than it is to bother trying to break through a firewall or something horribly complicated.